Hello, and welcome to Keep the Channel Open, a podcast featuring conversations with artists, writers, and curators. My name is Mike Sakasagawa, and this is episode 45. Today's guest is Jennifer DeCarlo. So how's everybody holding up these days? That's a question that seems to come up a lot lately this year, right? How you holding up, all things considered? Always with that little bit at the end, and then the answer is always something like, I'm good, or as good as can be expected, all things considered. There's a lot of that, right? I was kind of thinking about that and thinking about the show, as I was sitting down and before I was going to record this intro. And I was thinking about how, as I like to give the guest the opportunity to pick what we're going to talk about for at least part of the conversation, and then almost nobody chooses to talk about politics. And I think that's kind of interesting because not only are artists in general among the most aware and outspoken people I know when it comes to politics, but many of the specific artists I want to talk to on the show, they're making work that's very socially relevant, whether or not it's explicitly political. And often these folks are super vocal on social media when it comes to this stuff. And I was thinking about that a little bit because I also tend not to bring it up in these conversations, and it's not because it's not on my mind. It's basically always on my mind these days, and I'm sure that's true for many of the guests as well. So then what? Well, I guess I could see it as having to do with a certain reluctance to talk out loud about certain topics. Verbally, as opposed to, in a text-based medium like the internet. But I don't think that's it, because honestly, I don't think most of us are exactly avoiding the subject, and I'm certainly not trying to hide from it. I think really what it is this, that we're all kind of exhausted, worn out, and we all need some sort of refuge, even if just for an hour or so. Just a little space to recharge and enjoy yourself and take care of yourself a little bit. I know that for me, having these conversations really does that. It really gives me a lot of life. And if it does that for any of my guests or for any of you folks out there, I'm really glad. And whether you get that here or not, I hope that all of you are finding that refuge somewhere. So on to today's show. Today's guest is Jennifer DeCarlo of JDC Fine Art. As an art dealer, Jennifer was introduced to the market in Chicago before coming to San Diego to open her own space, and she spent nearly 10 years in the business to date. I was glad to get the chance to talk with her because, ever since I first met her, which was when she reviewed my portfolio at the Medium Festival several years ago, I found her to be very insightful. She has a really great eye and a really interesting artistic sensibility, and I really loved what she brought to the San Diego art scene with her gallery. Nowadays, she's sort of transitioning between San Diego and Chicago and doing a lot of work online. She's exploring new and creative ways to champion the artists she represents in response to an art market that's changing rapidly, both in terms of online aspects as well as, being very art fair heavy and event centric. One thing that came up in our conversation that I found particularly interesting was how she sees art collecting and dealing not only as linked pursuits, but as practices of art themselves. As always, if you've got questions or comments as you're listening, use the hashtag ChannelOpenPod on Twitter to join in the conversation. And now here's my conversation with Jennifer DeCarlo. You're just back in how long are you back in San Diego for?
Just for the week.
Just for the
now.
week. What brings you back to town?
It's just nice to kind of come back to this space, this house. We love this house. We are very connected to it.
Cool. Yeah. So you're going to be you're the first gallerist that I've talked to for the show. So I'm pretty excited about that. I think it'd be kind of a different perspective than some of the other sort of curator type people that I've talked to before. One of the things so I first met you, I think, through the Medium Festival. It was just like
so, and then you came by the gallery.
Yeah. It's funny. I end up saying that to I think probably 2/3 of the people I've talked to on here have been people I've met through Medium. So.
Well, that's the idea, right? People come to connect in a space together.
Yeah. So I remember. So we first met in a portfolio review, and then I was able to come check out your gallery. Which at the time was was downtown in San Diego, the JDC Fine Art Gallery.
That's it.
And it was, I was really, one of the things that I really enjoyed about your gallery was that, I feel San Diego, especially, this would have been like 5 years ago, I think.
Probably,
like that.
Yeah. It's been...
especially at that time, things are changing a little bit right now, but it seemed to me that like there weren't that many outlets for contemporary art of really any sort, especially back then, but especially photography. Things are sort of taking off a little bit more now, but I was really like the things that you were showing at your gallery were just so much more sort of cutting edge and interesting than what you see a lot of.
Oh, thank you.
So I guess the first thing I would want to ask you about is, sort of why, like, what was your experience starting a contemporary photo gallery in San Diego, and what was your, like, what sort of led up to that?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of things led up to starting the gallery here. I'm trained as an artist, so I come from that. I think that's why I care about work that I see as relevant. I think sometimes that the work I do as a gallerist, it is my art. I don't make it anymore, but showing it is an art, fighting for it, writing about it, just giving it a space to exist and just helping underline just in general what I think is important and happening is important. Starting a gallery anywhere is hard. Starting one here, I don't know. In some ways it was hard. In some ways it was easy. It's not that big of a market, so it's not hard to stand out, I don't think. But the kind of work, that I was showing, it's maybe a little brave. I think it's all beautiful. It's not all easy, but I think it's beautiful. I feel like we look at things sometimes and we see, I don't know, people want beautiful things, and I think definitions of beauty differ from person to person, but I like things that change every time I see them, and challenge me, and so I just look for that and I try and show it. And the space, as you saw, it was small, but it was comfortable. It doesn't have to be fancy to be good, like so much of the things that we find in San Diego. I mean, even the food, some of the best foods that, we went to Mike's Taco Club here in OB today, and it's just, they didn't even have a sign for a long time, but people knew it and they knew it was good and they went back. So, I think most galleries anyway kind of exist on a shoestring and a prayer. But, you just find a little nook and you start. And the community, I think it is changing. I think one of the other major players for a while, and now she's gone too, is Ginger Porcilla, who's was at the Art Institute. And then,
I got to talk to her for the show, but I didn't actually even realize until last night that she wasn't at SDAI anymore, but it's been a few months now. Yeah,
it's been a few months. I think, people are ready for it here. I think they want it. I think there are places, and I feel like the more you get engaged, the more you find that there are things here. You just have to look a little harder, and you have to ask for a little bit more. And I think, maybe just to ask of like listeners and patrons out there, it's really up to you. If you want to see this stuff and you want it to exist in your community, you have to patronize it. And that doesn't always mean buying one, though we do like it when you do. It does help the artists make more art. But, just coming out to see it and, sharing it, looking at it, talking about it, telling other people about it, that's what makes, it's like a grassroots effort like anything else. And I think, people here, they like that. They like to feel like they can make a change. I think that's actually just something that is inherent to California even. I think sometimes we're a little laid back and sometimes we're a little quiet and sometimes we're a little easygoing, but at the same time, I think we're deep thinkers and we are not afraid to be ourselves. Yeah. And we're not afraid. I mean, you walk around here and people are just wearing, plus we're in Ocean Beach, but they might be wearing a boa, and I mean a live one.
Yeah.
They might be driving the Starship Enterprise down the street. There's a guy who has changed his golf cart out to be, but,
Yeah.
So apply that to art. It's just another part of life.
Yeah. The thing that you were saying just a second ago about beautiful work was that was something interesting I was thinking about in relation to sort of the difference between what a gallerist is gonna do. Like I think a lot of times the people who aren't like advanced collectors or like real connected with art don't necessarily know the difference between like what does a museum curator do versus what does a gallerist do. How are those a little different? Like one of the things that I thought was interesting is that like San Diego does not actually lack for art galleries. There are a ton of them around here, but most of them are selling things that are really, really commercial. Yeah. But I would think that even for someone like you who's very engaged with contemporary art, which is not like in contemporary art, a lot of it is beautiful, but that's not always the point of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's that, and some of that is driven by the dealer. Like, what's the point of what we're doing? It's like our channel. So, I mean, not to lose too much time talking about the other kinds. There's a lot of different kinds of galleries. There's a lot of different kinds of dealers. I think in any place where you have a lot of tourism, I think, there maybe are a lot of people selling just really slick, pretty things that look like your calendar. And if you want something that looks like that, you can get it, but it's not even in the arena. That's the thing that sometimes, and this isn't something I don't want to like dwell on too much, but if that's what you want, go and buy it and like whatever, go and buy it and live with it. But it's not really, you might spend a lot for it. And it hurts me to know that people spend a lot on stuff like that, a lot.
Yeah.
More than to buy something from what I would call like a real valid artist. They're making things that, artists, people, it's a funny thing. If you meet a happy artist, they might not really be making, you don't want to say it like this, but like relevant work. I think they are tortured. It's hard. They're trying to, consolidate things that are happening in the world. They're trying to like market. That's people I care about. They're trying to like put up a flag. This is, it is kind of like my protest these are the things that are important in the world. Yeah. And it doesn't all have to be harsh. Like actually we're sitting here and we'll get to that later in my living room with actually a lot of beautiful, beautiful work. But, it has like a lot of grit too. And, some of the other work we have has like a little bit of grit, or like a vanitas, like a kind of,
Yeah. Well, and, like two of the people that I've talked to for the show so far, who you have worked with extensively, Paul Tournay and Matt Eich. Yeah. Both of them are making extremely socially relevant work.
Yes.
But it's also, sometimes work that's sort of visually challenging.
Sometimes, but some of them are really beautiful too,
Yeah. Well, like Matt's picture of like the zebra. Yeah. Is like that one seems like it would, I could see that hanging in someone's living room a little more easily than some of the
other pieces.
But then also they both have books, which are another thing that, like I saw Paul's Estamos Buscando book at your gallery. It was actually at an opening for Matt's thing. But that's something that you're doing, you were selling both books and wall prints. But it's something that it seems like might always be sort of like a negotiation on some level that you want to, because the work that you're making, that you're showing and that you're representing is not always obvious to like the lay person, like why it's beautiful, or that you can't just, like, I don't know, like somebody like Peter Lick or something, right? Like, we all have opinions about Peter Lick,
Yeah.
but like,
That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about calendar art.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And, but like somebody like that, he can put a showroom in Vegas, and like he doesn't have to like explain to people
Why it's pretty.
because it just is pretty.
Yeah.
But like for the kinds of work that you're showing, which I not only find a lot more interesting and important, but just like for me, a lot more emotionally relevant.
Yeah.
Too. But it's not necessarily the kind of thing that just somebody walking down the street is going to easily grasp.
But people who walk down the street aren't really maybe looking for this. That's why it's important, I think, ultimately, to have not just a social presence, but a physical presence. Mm-hmm. But because you might convert people, you might have conversations. But, like there are other dealers in town who I think show actually really, they walk at maybe an easier line in some ways. Like they're showing really beautiful work. Some of it's contemporary, some of it's not, but they're showing really beautiful work, or even just maybe in general, we talk about like California and what's happening here visually. I think there is, or even just more broadly, maybe a gravitation to minimalism or to conceptual work. Maybe it's, I like narratives, that's me, but I think sometimes work like that, it can be smart and intellectual and relevant. It might not be socially conscious outwardly, where some of my work is. It might be if you look a little deeper. I think a lot of times with good work, it is socially conscious to some extent. But so there are things that are maybe less visually gritty or, not as hard to approach, or just like, or even just like on a surface level, not even understand what it's about on a deeper level. I think there's that. And I think there's a space for that. I think, that might be our bridge. But certainly there's a lot of people collecting, portraits. I mean, ultimately we're people. We like looking at pictures of people because we are people.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of silly, but, to say it like that and to know other people's stories. I mean, when we pick up a book, it's not usually about a landscape. It's usually about a character.
Yeah.
So, I think there's hope. And I think there's as many, I think, spaces for collectors as there are dealers. It's about getting a following. So,
when talking about collectors, you as a gallerist, like, how much do you, I guess part of this would be how much of your time would you spend, but also sort of how much sort of do you see your role as sort of, like, I would imagine that the sort of art collecting population is fairly small.
Yeah.
So, like, my guess, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, my guess would be that, like, most galleries would be selling most of their work to, like, like, people who are coming in regularly and like these are like collectors.
Yeah.
So like, but also, like, I would also think that you would want to cultivate new collectors as well. So like, what do you find the balance to be there? Well,
I'm still pretty young at this. So most of my collectors, I'm either trying, they're friends I'm trying to turn into collectors. They're young professionals I'm hoping to, kind of open the door for them. I think then there's a few that, once they find me, they seem, and I think this is pretty true across the board. If a collector or a patron, and like these are different things sometimes, and all collectors have a different angle. Why are they collecting? But if they find me and they like my sort of view of the world, I think that's what it's really about. How I see the world through these artists, or through, ultimately through a group of them, through like a little stable. If they like what I've had so far, I think they'll like what I'll find. And so they do come back. So, it's about just turning a few potential collectors into collectors. And then, you find a few, or they find you every year. And then, the base grows and you can grow and you can all kind of grow together. It's a slow thing. I think it's not fast, and I don't think there's really a way to speed it up. I think it's about relationships. It's about matchmaking. I think that's not only my favorite part of the job, but it's something I wish I had more people to do it for, I guess you could say. So I'm always looking to turn one group into the other, but things, they spread slow. I think just like anything good, and kind of, I don't want to say it's a luxury thing. It is and it isn't. For me, art's kind of a necessity. It changes your life to live with it, or it should. If it's not doing that, then you didn't buy the right one. But it's, it's a slow winning over. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of people probably, even like your gallery in San Diego is like, it's very intimate. Like it was, not like a big, giant, intimidating thing. But I think probably even so, there are a lot of people just find the idea of an art gallery sort of intimidating.
Yeah.
It's sort of...
I know, they do, and that's the biggest hurdle. So anybody who comes in, and there were a few times that two groups of teenagers came in, I remember distinctly, separate from each other, two groups, over time, one was about a handful of, like probably 5 young women, and, then one other mixed group, and they were both so, like, shocked. They were shocked that I sort of spent time talking to them like anybody else. Anybody who comes in, I talk to them.
Right.
I think that's unusual. It could be because I'm young. It could be because the way the space was, everything was very immediate. There was no office. It could just be me, my personality probably is what it really is. I want to make sure people know what they're looking at, because I think a lot of people don't, and they're afraid to ask, and it's just an icebreaker. Sometimes we have to be that ourselves.
Yeah.
And so, I would talk to people, but with those young people, they were really interested. I actually think they got it. I think a lot of people don't get it. I think we start to get to a point when we get older, like maybe our imagination isn't as limber as it used to be, or I don't know, we're too afraid to say what we think something's about, because what if we're wrong? Art is a visual language. It can be read. We talk about it like that in an academic sense, to read it. What is it about? What is it referring to? What is it referencing? Does it have, connotations to like art historical connotations? Does it have I think the better the work, the more of any of that it might have. So, but anything has baggage around it. It's like symbols, or, we learn letters and they have a sound and they have a value and they have a meaning together, and then they make words. Art has that too.
Right.
And you can learn to read it. And there's a lot of ways to learn to read it. I think the best way is just go and experience it. Try and make ideas about what you think it's about. Read the artist statement, read the curator's statement, and then say, oh yeah, I kind of see that. Or, oh yeah, I kind of thought that. Or, ooh, I really didn't. I was off on that one. And the more times you do that, the more you start to pick up on the way that visual language works. But I think it's actually really inherent at its base. So I think young people actually sometimes are more attuned to it, because they're attaching to their, reflexes in a way that sometimes we get older and we're afraid to.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people who might even become collectors, who might they be? They would be educated people, probably. They're people who like other kinds of culture. They're people, who are probably, they probably went to college and probably some kind of, graduate program, and they're at a point in their life where they either have a little money and they want to decorate. Maybe it starts like that. Or maybe they really are interested and they've bought something before. I think once you do it once and you realize how much it does affect your life and like enrich it, I think they want to do it again.
Yeah.
And, so once you break the ice, I think it's really easy to go back again and again.
That's an interesting thing that I hadn't really thought about. how people's processes might change as over the course of their lifetime. It makes a lot of sense. And I remember reading a thing, oh gosh, this was probably like 10 or 15 years ago, but some article that somebody sent me about different kinds of intelligence that people have.
Yeah.
Where like when you're young, you don't
like
have
IQ
experience,
and EQ.
so like you have to discover everything. You have this sort of more elastic intelligence, but when you're older, people tend to spend less time on new discovery and more relying on their past experience, which is sort of what I think they called it crystallized intelligence. But it's interesting to think about that because art at its best is a real like it's an active engagement that you have to have with it.
Yes.
And I think maybe a lot of people don't really realize that, especially with visual arts, especially with like more static visual arts. Like, movies are one thing, right? But like, people I think tend to think of like a painting or a photograph as something that you just kind of look at, but that you're not really actively in communication with.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I like things that are more challenging because I don't stop thinking about them. My day, what happened to me in the day, it's going to apply in a different way to the work I look at just because I'm bringing different baggage to it and my experience with it.
Yeah.
So, and that's a give and take thing. I think really good art does that, but it should be kind of a little visceral. I know that's kind of a strange word and I use it a lot, but to describe my feelings about art, and it seems like kind of a strange word maybe to use, but it should have an effect on you to see work. And again, like it should be changing every time you see it.
Yeah. I think that's something like for me, some art does like grow on me and then, will grow on me in a way that I can have a lasting relationship with it. But I find that for me, the art that has been the most meaningful to me over my lifetime so far has been the art where it has an immediate, like I have an immediate response to it just before I even think about it too much. But then as I continue to come back to it, then I can, I'm sort of analyzing my response to it and what it is that I'm reacting to. And that might change from day to day depending on my mood or what new experiences I've had. And that the best art can do both of those things where I can have that immediate response, but also have a deepening relationship with it. But it's hard to, it's hard to find that.
Well, I don't know. It is and it isn't. I think if you found it at a place, go back to that place. Because they'll probably have more of it. It's like anything, right? Oh, that place has my favorite t-shirts. Go back, buy another one. That's what we all do that. So, I mean, art's no different than any other, in that regard, it's not different than any other commodity. So if you find, that's why, following galleries or programs or museums or, artists that you like, keep following them because, if you like them now, chances are you'll like the next installment.
So one of the things you mentioned before was about how, and it sort of relates to this too, like that, you as a gallerist are not just passively, you're not just passively, providing a space for this stuff, but actually that you have a curatorial point of view, right? And so people who know you, and have collected from you in the past can know that when you discover something new, that they're likely to find value in it because they already sort of trust your judgment on that. What I'm kind of curious about is how you go about that discovery.
It's different with every artist. Sometimes they find me, sometimes I find them, sometimes we find each other. Maybe I, saw it. It's kind of different with everybody. Sometimes I see it in one place, then I see it in another, and then maybe if I meet them and I like them as a person, then it's a click, it's a connection. Some of them in the beginning I found with a woman I worked with in Chicago, Martha Schneider. And, you know, when I got attached to the artists and their working and their style and just working with them, a few of the ones particularly were younger. So they were my age. They started with Martha when I was starting there. And, you know, we had a connection from the beginning, and it felt like when I left Chicago for San Diego, it felt like I couldn't just like leave them. And so this was a space that had a lot of opportunity for them, and no one was representing them here. So it made a lot of sense to just keep working with them in a new space. And then, you know, you find others along the way, but I feel like you don't need that many because, especially because how I work, I try and work with an artist. Like, I think it takes a long time to get things to stick. It's hard. It's hard for artists. And I think a flash in the pan doesn't help me and it doesn't help them. So I try when I work with someone to stay with them, and we, you know, try and like cultivate them. And we kind of, in a way, we kind of cultivate each other. They help grow with what's happening as they develop. It grows, you know, my vision will grow with theirs, and it will show me kind of what's happening with the gallery in a bigger way, or the group of artists I'm showing. And then, so we kind of move together, I think. And then you bring a new one on to fill a gap somehow or other, you know, and it grows slowly. But some dealers just give a show and then that's it. You know, they sell it or they don't, and that's it. I think there's times for that. Sometimes you have to test it out and see if it works well to work together too, or if it's received well by the public. But, you know, I mean, you kind of find each other slowly. I mean, with Paul, who's someone that people can kind of go back through your archives and maybe hear about, I think we met. I think he started coming to my galleries. I think I met him at Bellows, another gallery. I think we started kind of chatting, and then there was a point when I kept looking at his work and I kept thinking, God, it's so good, but it's too good for me. I'm such a young dealer. I don't have that many connections yet. It's too good for me. And, you know, he said, well, you know, not everyone else, like no one else really wants to show it. And I said, all right, well, if no one else wants to show it, then let's do it. And we've actually made a lot of progress together. It's probably been, I bet, 4 years. And now, you know, we're planning a show with Ginger at her new venue.
Yeah, where she's in.
So she's at Mocha Tucson.
That's right.
And
yeah.
I don't know if that has been publicly announced yet, but I'm sure that by the time
I
you
saw
air this,
it.
oh, you did.
Yeah,
Okay,
I saw it
because
yeah.
It's going to be I'm very proud that that's going to happen. I wish San Diego could see it, but in a way they did. Actually, that was another, when I saw Paul's Border Wall for the first time, it was at Mesa College. And it was Alessandra Montezuma. I think that's her name. But she teaches there, and she put it in a group show about the border. And it was, when I saw that, I thought, okay, that's it. If no one else really, if this is true, no one else is giving this work a space, I'm giving it a space. There's not that many, I guess, well, there's not that many, as many as I show. That's how many I believe in as much as him. But that work is so important, especially today. You know, I wanted people to see it.
Yeah.
So we've been working hard. We've been fighting for it. I've been trying to write other institutions for him to try and get curators' attention. Hopefully this show, I think, will give us some more clout and some more, you know, just documentation of the work. And it would be really nice to travel it to other museums.
That's not really something I'd considered,
That we do.
Yeah, that like a gallerist would be involved with, you know, helping develop other programs with other institutions like a museum or something like that. I think it happens. I don't know. I mean, but look at Mark Quint, who's probably really to me the best leader of a dealer in this community for sure. I mean, that's the one I respect. I mean, I hope he hears me say that someday. I mean, that would be an idol for sure. Yeah. For me. But he's worked hand in hand with the Contemporary Museum, as has Joe Bellows. I mean, he's worked with them, I think, for many years too. I think he even worked with them at some point. I don't know.
Could be wrong. Yeah. But I mean, I think a lot of times dealers do. I think it's to our advantage to work together. It's always a little tricky to work with a museum because we really are two parts of the machine that, you know, you don't want to have conflict of interest. You want to make sure you remain very like neutral. I think there's reasons for that, and those need to be respected. But, you know, in terms of smaller cities making a mark, I think, you know, and trying to get viewership and trying to get new people involved in even caring what any of these artists do, which is to their benefit as much as ours. I think that a little bit of working together is kind of required. You should be careful about it. But yeah, I think that's also something that I do that's different than other dealers. I think some dealers will pitch stuff to museums or tell curators about it. I'm sure that I'm more active than others in that regard. You know, having been in a smaller venue where you know, and when I first started, as today, I wish I had more collectors than I did and more patrons than I did. You know, that's something that I'm growing. But in the interim, I'm willing, that's one thing I tell the artists, well, I might not be able to get a lot of sales today. I'm growing as much as you are, but there are other ways I can help you and work for you and earn the right to represent you. And so that's one thing that I told many of them I would do. So I think I'm unique in that way. You know, I think sometimes the machine gets going, and it might be hard for dealers to do this all the time for their artists if they have a lot of sales or they have a steadier or faster exhibition schedule than I was only doing 4. Or they're doing a lot of art fairs. It might start to get hard to find time to do any of those extra things. But again, you know, I think if I can do that for my artists, I think it's going to help both of us, especially if we're going to work together for years.
Yeah. So one of the things that I, since we met at a portfolio review, and I have to say, so you've reviewed my work twice now, and I have to say that you were like I've talked to a lot of reviewers now. I've always found your review sessions to be very insightful.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
And really no bullshit either. But like also, like one of the things I really appreciated was like you were a reviewer the first year I ever did portfolio reviews, and at that time, like in retrospect, I didn't realize it at the time, but my work was really not ready to be shown, not really ready for prime time kind of thing, which is, you know, that is what it is. But one of the things I really appreciated in my session with you that year was that like you didn't bullshit me about that, right? Like you were not gonna just be nice for the sake of being nice, but also you gave me a lot of stuff to think about, you know, things that I could do with my work going forward. And that's like not some, like most of the reviewers at Medium are pretty nice, but like, you know, they don't all engage with the work where it is, and you know, I
think you kind of have to. I think, well, I've been doing reviews for a while. I mean, that's my training, really. You know, I'm trained as an artist, so I have the MFA. So that's what I did, you know, in school. We would sit together and we would usually look at each other's work. That's what they are, pure critique. And you really are trying to challenge each other, say what's working, say what's not working. But so, I mean, it should be that was my background. So I'm glad that it worked. They taught me something.
Yeah.
But I think you always have to approach the work as where it is, what's going on. I think you have to be honest with people. I think people, when they do reviews, you know, sometimes you don't know if you're ready until you go and you find out you're not ready. I mean, so, I mean, sometimes that's just where people start, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know. And I think it's good to have realistic goals for work, and I think, it's good to hear the truth about it, but I think also people who want to make art should always be able to make it, and it's really a self-exploration as much as anything else. I mean, I think that's really what it is.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I mean by the tortured artist. It's really, really hard to dig into yourself and to pull something out and to put it in front of the world.
Yeah.
You know, that's the men and the boys there, you know, that's, you know.
Yeah.
That's the difference between calendar art
Yeah.
and real art. But, you know, anybody can challenge themselves and get better and, you know, try and grow and cultivate what they're doing at whatever point they're at, even if it's for their own enrichment.
Yeah. When you are approaching a review session, like what kinds of things are you looking for, and what kinds of, like, I'm sure that you've seen a lot of different kinds of work from a lot of different kinds of people in these kinds of events, and obviously, like, you know, art is so broad. It's not like you can say, well, you have to do this, this, and this, and it'll be successful. But I guess I just sort of wonder if there are sort of patterns of, I'm not really saying, like, I guess I'm not really looking for like a advice exactly, but just sort of like, you know, what makes you feel good about a review session, and what.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a lot less pressure for me than for the artist.
Well,
I'm just, you know, I'm just giving knee-jerk reaction in a way that's like, you need to hear how I'm seeing it, you know, because you guys are trying to communicate an idea. So I kind of see it as I'm trying to tell you how it's being received so that you can know if it's working or not. And then asking questions to see, you know, I need to know what it's about. You know, sometimes, because sometimes it isn't working quite right. And, you know, so I want to know, and it's a test in a way too, like, are they achieving the goals that they have for the work? But I mean, I just am really trying to help them achieve whatever goal they have. So I ask them that, what are your goals for the work? What's your history? So I know how far along they should be based on whatever kind of training, if any, they've had. You know, so some people I know I can challenge more than others. If they tell me they've an undergraduate or a graduate degree, like, now I'm expecting a little bit more, you know, that not only that they can take it, you know, they can take the challenge. Like, they're probably already seasoned to it. So some people, if they don't have that, maybe, you know, have to approach it a little differently. But I really like that moment. I really like sharing work with people. I like being someone who can see it, and maybe for the first time or one of the first ones to see it, and just, you know, really help them grow what they're doing. So it's all about them. And sometimes I like it enough that I want to show it. It hasn't happened a lot because I try not to take too many on, because I'm trying to, you know, I can only do like 200% for a few people.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are people I found at reviews. I mean, some I found I feel like I haven't been able to do anything with it yet. I don't know when I will, but there's some things I've seen, you know, again, for Medium. Maybe I'll do a little show, like a little pop-up here or something, but.
Yeah, I just think it's so interesting because, you know, my only experience is on, you know, my side of the table, right? And so I have been reviewed by a lot of different, like, people in different roles, like whether they're museum people or publishers or gallerists or whatever, right? But then also who have a wide range of approach. And obviously some of those are easier or harder for me as in my role. But one of the things that I also find really interesting is that I haven't conducted a review, but I've talked to a lot of people who have been in reviews and watched sort of the reaction, even when you're at the table and, you know, it's, you know, you're trying to focus on what you're doing, but sometimes you can kind of hear what's going on around you. And it always strikes me that there's a real wide range of responses to getting a critique. And obviously, like, you know, everybody likes it when people say nice things about your work, but like some people, when they'll get an honest critique that isn't stellar, there's just like, I don't know, I can sense this sort of real sense of entitlement from some people.
From the artist?
From the artist, yeah, where it'll be like, after the review session, like, I don't know what they said in the review session, but afterwards they'll come out and just be like,
yeah, I mean, those are the kind of people, if you're going to be like that, it's like, almost don't do it.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be really open. It's hard to hear that stuff. I mean, I've been on both sides of the table. it's been a while since I've been on the other side, but I remember it's hard. Mm-hmm. You know, it's scary and it's hard. And, you know, I think if you've never done a review or if you've struggled with them before, I think this is what I would say: prepare yourself. Someone's going to love it. Someone's going to hate it. Most people are going to be in the middle. Try and take notes. Try and say, what are a lot of them saying? Because I think a lot of times, if it's working or if it's not, a lot of us are going to kind of hit on that same thing. Try and listen for that. Mm-hmm. You know, what keeps coming up? Run with that. Try and improve the things that aren't working, you know, and vice versa. But
yeah, I think a lot of people too they're not necessarily looking for, I don't know what they're looking for, but I think a lot of people are looking just for validation. I
think they are, but I think, well, obviously if they're really serious, they're probably looking for someone to show the work, mm-hmm. you know, and I think that's maybe where the reviews have gotten a little bit like, it's a little bit too much pressure, and maybe it's a little bit too much for everybody, because I don't think most dealers are really looking to pick up that many new artists.
Yeah.
It has to be like, I make a joke, but it's like on a scale of 1 to 10, it needs to be like maybe a 12, mm-hmm. you know, and if it's a 12 in every category, you know, and I really kind of, it bugs me later that I can't get it out of my head, then maybe I'll show it. And if they're nice, you know, I don't want to work with anyone who isn't nice.
I think a lot of people don't really, a lot of artists don't really necessarily realize.
Most of them are pretty nice.
Yeah, but I think there are some people, and I agree with you. Like, my experience with an artist has been surprisingly, like, to me, shockingly generous. People are really wonderful, but there are also, I think, some people who don't really realize how much of a factor just being pleasant to be around can be. Like, you know, everything else being equal, like, why wouldn't you want to work with the person who's nice, you know?
I mean, that's, you know, because there's a few, not many luckily, but there's a few I've worked with and I'm like, oh my God, your work is interesting, but you're just, I can't do this. I'm not doing this again. You know, I've been lucky that it hasn't been that many. It's maybe two you think of, but I mean, the other one, because it's really, I mean, nobody really makes that much doing this. We do it because we love it.
Yeah.
You know, so we have to really enjoy each other.
Yeah. So we should probably take a quick break and we'll come back and do the second segment.
Okay.
So for the second segment, I always ask the guests to bring a topic of their own, which can be anything that you want to talk about. So what would you like to talk about today?
So I wanted to talk a little bit about collecting and just what that's about. Mm-hmm. Kind of maybe demystify it a little bit.
Sure.
It is the reason that I am a dealer.
Right.
I'm trying to support my habit. So, you know, don't be afraid, everyone. Just jump in and start bringing beautiful work into your home. And by that I mean sometimes things that are elegant, sometimes things that are challenging, sometimes things that haunt you and you don't know why, sometimes things that remind you of your past or maybe some kind of family legacy, maybe places you've been. I think those are common things people start to gravitate towards. We did a quick walkthrough when you arrived.
Yeah.
You know, my first piece, that might be a good place to start.
Sure.
The first piece I bought, so I was trained as an artist. I'd worked in a gallery for probably even 3 years and I still hadn't bought a piece of art. And I thought, okay, I should really do something about this because, you know, a lot of work, great work comes before me and I see it. And it was expensive, you know, I mean, at the time I was making $13.50. So people talk about buying art and it's so expensive, etc. But, you know, I was considering it at that salary. So do the math. It's not a lot.
Yeah.
So it was really a lot for me. I think dealers ask us because we will make it work for you. If you really love it and we know you, and you, especially if you've been coming to all our shows, etc., you know, will we find a way to make it work for you, yeah, we will, you know, layaway, etc. So, you know, I'm the assistant director at a gallery in Chicago, and I felt like I needed to just even break the ice for myself. Actually, we'll have to even back up, because one of the first pieces was a Rauschenberg that I actually got by working. I was doing work, and that's what I got. I was paid in art. So, you know, if you have a trade out there that you can help an artist, maybe you're a lawyer, maybe you're a banker, maybe you're an accountant, maybe you're, I don't know, an insurance guy. Hey, if you like the artist, maybe you can do a trade. A lot of times they do, and they're really happy to do it because they don't have the money to afford you either. So, you know, sometimes getting creative isn't the silliest thing. And even with dealers, I know dealers have done trades with, you know, people who they need too. But the first piece I ever bought was the Alex Soth, and actually I had looked at his work for a while. I really liked it. Every time I went to an art fair, I'd walk around and, you know, I'd see something from across the room and I'd think, oh, I really like that. Who's that by? And it would be Alec. And I thought, God, I know, but it's like it's a lot. I don't know if I can afford it. So the dealer who represents him, is Martin Weinstein in Minneapolis, and that's close. We were in Chicago at the time. So we actually shared some other artists with him. And so, you know, we knew each other, and actually Martha, the woman who's my mentor, called Martin up and said, come on, you got to give her a really good price first. Okay. Just so you know. And also, what do you have? And so I got on the phone with them and they said, what's your price range? And I told them, and they made recommendations based on that. So sometimes, you know, one thing can come before the other. It might not be about the piece on its own to start. It might be about the artist. You like their work. You like it a lot. And you just want to do something about it. And you might have to be willing to change your mind about which piece of it is, just to touch it, just to have some of it. So that's what happened. So they sent a list of pieces that they had and that were in my price range, and, you know, also what works that they happen to have in the gallery, because sometimes things in the gallery, you know, they can maybe make a better price on than something they have to get from the artist. So, you know, we made a match, and that was the first piece of art I bought. And it's the Prophet in the Wilderness. It's Bible study, Prophet in the Wilderness. And it's actually, this is where, you know, the beauty and the ugly kind of come together. I will describe it for you. It is a table in a kitchen. There's a Bible study book that's open, and there's a picture of, well, sitting on the Bible study book is an individually wrapped slice of bread on one side, and a very menacing knife on the other. There's a little drawing of, I think it's Julius Caesar or Augustus Caesar. There's some highlighting in the book and notes everywhere. There's some wine glasses overturned behind it. Actually, the wine glasses are the exact same wine glasses my grandmother used to have in her house growing up. And then this is all sitting on a table in front of this like terribly dirty screen window that even has like old leaves and cigarette butts. And it's just really just disheveled kind of, I mean, I don't know if I'd want to eat anything coming out of that kitchen. I don't know if the house is abandoned. I don't really know. But it doesn't seem like a beautiful image, but it has like so many different strange and interesting connotations, you know, the references, the biblical and historical references. I think right now, even at the time, that was right after the market crashed. I think it's one of the reasons too, like they made a good price for me. They wanted to help support the artist, this dealer did. And so they made this special price even for me because, well, I'm in the business, etc. But, you know, it was this kind of like disillusionment with America and the American condition, and this strange sense of hope or imperialism. You know, I mean, it's a weird, you know, we modeled our system, even our government, after, you know, Rome and the democracies there, which actually weren't quite perfect either, you know, and so it's kind of all of that mixed together. And I've never seen a single wrapped slice of bread. It makes you think, like, are they having some crazy communion, you know, where they're breaking bread together? I don't know. But, you know, I can go on. And every time I see that picture, it's telling me some other little thing, or there's some other little detail, you know.
Yeah.
So,
I love that you're able to describe it. And like, you can't see it from where you're sitting right now. It's just right in the other room. but I love that you're able to talk about it. You know it so well, right? It's something that you've lived with and seen so many times. I think that's really amazing.
They live in my head. If that starts to happen to you for a piece, please buy it because you should have it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's interesting, because that piece, I guess I could see where, someone might look at it and say, like, why is it beautiful? To me, like, something about Alec's work that I love so much is that he does very often take on these subjects that are, the subjects of his photographs are very sort of gritty, sometimes sort of dirty looking. Mm-hmm. But, in contrast to, I think, some other people who are sort of working in that sort of documentary, semi-documentary space, I always, maybe not always, but I really often with his work find that there's this sort of sense of wonder to it as well.
Yeah.
Like that he's very enchanted with the things that he's looking at.
Yeah, there's like a strange sort of magic.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what it is. I think of that guy. It's from the same series. It's that guy. He's like holding this airplane.
Yeah.
I mean, what a weird man. I think of that.
And what I love about that photograph, right, is, and it's just titled with the guy's name. I can't remember what it is, but, that's the one I always think of with Alex Worth. And it's such the guy is such a character. And, maybe if you were just walking down the street, you'd be like, I don't know. But
he's like a weird hero.
Yeah. He seems kind of excited about his planes that he's holding in his hands, these little toy planes. And like, there's something about it that's kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of wonderful, right? But, and to me, that just seems obvious, right? But I also know that, like, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, it wouldn't have been obvious to me, right? But there's just some sort of quality about it. And also with his work too, like, like the piece that you have and that piece, there's something about the quality of light that he uses that is very, I don't know. It elevates the scene a little bit more.
There's a drama.
Yeah.
But I think too, to compare visual language to other kinds of things that we like to engage, other, arts, literary, or, even if we dumb it down to television, who wants to see a story where nothing goes wrong?
Right.
Nobody. It's not exciting.
Right.
I mean, we want something that's got like a little like roller coaster. We want I think we all want something. You don't want it to flatline. I mean, so I like works that have a drama of some kind.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, to talk about some of the more beautiful, like they seem beautiful images, maybe. Jennifer Greenberg, she's an artist I represent, and I do try and buy artists I represent. I mean, Alec is one of the ones that I don't, so he's maybe an exception. And I don't have a lot of them because I'm really trying not only to put my money where my mouth is, but I really like these people. I like their work. They need it. I'm trying, again, to support the habit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm picking the ones I want too. And to show them is another way to sort of touch all of their work.
Yeah.
And in a certain way, I won't own it all, but, I get to have had it all a little bit in my life and have my hands on it, literally.
Yeah.
But, Jennifer Greenberg, we have 2 of her pieces now. She's getting more and more attention. Her work, revising history, she's been working on for a couple of years. It's changing a lot. I think some of the ones that she sold well, we made a joke together, she and I, as long as I'm wearing a bathing suit, people want to buy it, and maybe that says something about us right there. But we actually do have one of her, it's a scene. So here's how she makes them. She finds vintage negatives. She collects them. She archives them. She flags some. She goes back to them because they bother her. There's something about it. She will dress up like someone in the picture. She will play them. She'll photograph herself playing them. She becomes them. She then takes that portrait of herself, full body, and she'll Photoshop herself into the place where they were in the image. And then she'll print the image larger. So these were all originally small. I mean, mid-century, so smaller negatives. So when we see the final work, it's kind of already broken reality. We look at it and it looks old, and then it's big, so it's like, well, it's not old, but it looks old, so how did she do it? And especially if you start to see more than one of hers at the same time, you realize, wait, it's like she's this other person. So it works really well if you see it in the show for the first time.
Yeah. Her work is so, like, that. One of the things I think is kind of interesting that I hadn't really thought of with her work is in the context of collecting, that most people are probably going to just take one back. And I've always, when I've seen her work, it's always been like either an online feature or like in a show or something like that, where there's several pieces together. And when you see a bunch of them, then you can see, oh, she's actually, like, if you just see one of them by themselves, you might not know, right?
You might not know.
But when you see that she's a recurring figure in each of these, then that gives you a clue.
Yeah.
That's one where I think I just love, because if you have the one by itself, then it's something that if you know, but then maybe you're showing it to somebody who doesn't know, then like I don't know, there's just something to be able to talk about it. Like, well, what do you think of this? What do you think's going on there? And, the story of how she makes it. I don't know. I really appreciate it. I like how, when there's something about the art that you could miss if you're not paying attention. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're owning it, then you already know it's baggage. So if you're just appreciating someone else's collection, you might miss that little nuance. But actually, we used to have we have two of hers right now. The other one is in Chicago, but we used to actually have them so you could see the both at the same time. The other one was here, and then so you could see. And she actually has changed a lot. Her physique has changed a lot in the last few years. She actually lost a lot of weight, and so she looks different. But even picture to picture within time frames, she looks different. It's because she's being a different person. She is someone different in each picture. But I think, it did kind of give it away a little bit, which I think is fun. But I mean, I think it's actually really amazing. I mean, most people who come to my house actually are in the arts, but people who aren't, I don't know if they actually even notice that much. Though I do think people, even strangers who can, like, we all peer in windows. We've had people walk by, oh, that's the house that has all the art. Oh, I love it. It's so beautiful. I mean, we get to a point in our life where, we're not eating off it's not college. This is not paper plates anymore, guys. Graduate from the poster. And one thing I will say about photography or works on paper or anything that's editioned, so photographs, other kinds of printmaking, drawing, maybe artist studies, those are all going to be more approachable in price. So that's a good place to start if you don't know where or how to start. Yeah.
It's something that, like, I think a lot of people, when they think of art galleries, tend to think of painting first. And
why do they think of painting? Like, art equals painting. Well, but art also equals photography, and art equals video, and art equals installation, and art equals sculpture, and art equals, all these other things.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't realize that stuff like photography in particular is a lot more affordable for, like, especially when you're talking about, like, there's no way that I could afford a painting that's by a painter who is of the same caliber and recognition as somebody like Alex Soth.
Right.
But, like, maybe I could afford an Alex Soth print if, and I would probably have to, like, come up with some kind of
No, they do a layaway. But, at just about every dealer. Always ask that.
Yeah. But, I mean, so when you factor in that, like, having some kind of layaway or something like that, like, that's actually within reach for me. And he's a world-class artist, so whereas, somebody who's a similar caliber of painter, I might not be able to ever afford something like that, know. But it's interesting. Most of the art that I have in my home is prints, and I usually have smaller prints. Yeah. But it's very accessible. I also buy a lot of books. Books are one of the
people
things that
collect books. Yeah. Books are really great to collect.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a walk around too. So we have photography. We have, I guess like textiles. I usually do, that's when I travel, I bring those back. So, like local weavings. So I have, from Greece or North Africa or Peru, there's like, some people would, yes, it classifies, I guess, technically as craft, but it's an art, and that's that whole, there's a whole battle with that. But it is a really interesting thing. And actually there's a lot of hidden symbolism that probably has been lost along the way, especially I don't know a lot about it, but I do recognize that there's a big history in that, and that those are actually really highly invested objects to the cultures they belong to, and they're also functional and they're cool. So we collect those. And then, vernaculars. I like to collect vernaculars. They're fun.
Yeah. It's really,
and anyone could collect that.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, collecting is something that is so intimidating for so many people. Just like even the word like art collector sounds sort of real highfalutin and sort of unapproachable for a lot of people. But there are a lot of ways to have art in your life that are, especially if you're, you can find things that you love, and that I think, when I think about the photographs or we have a couple of prints there, I don't know, works on paper kind of prints that are like we have this one that's in our living room that we've had we got it as a wedding present actually, so that would be 14 years almost. And I look at it every day, and it's just it's more than just a decoration. It's like where people don't really sometimes think about art in terms of more than just like what will go with my furniture.
Yeah.
But like I've been looking at this print for almost 14 years now, and when you live with it, it sort of becomes a part of your life in a way that might not have been obvious when before you had it.
I think what they do is when you get work, it means something to you in the moment you get it. It should reward you every day. But then as years and years go on, I think it reminds you of a moment in your life. Mm-hmm. It's a souvenir of your life, too. So it'll take you back to that moment. You know, we have a couple of Paul Cavas, one of them was actually a present from the artist when we got married, this little blue one here. And he had one that was similar to it. And I loved it. And it was that like antique blue paper. It reminds you of, like a robin's egg. And I had actually asked him if I could buy it. And he's like, oh, I sold that one. Cause all of his are unique. He does photo collage. So they're all one of a kind. And he has, handmade papers or like antique papers that have writing. This one has cursive. Someone's like practicing their cursive on this blue paper. And then, so the one he had was, he'd sold it years before, but it was in the book that he had. And so he sent this one because it had qualities like it. And it's this, then it's a vintage image of a girl in a bathing suit, and like part of it's torn. So you don't see her face. So she's kind of this anonymous little beauty, and it's just very precious. There's like a little bird wing, like on the side. And so it's just this kind of sweet, image. It's very, it's very sweet. It's very kind of vintage, kind of elegant, kind of, from this other time. It's, I don't know, it's very soft with the writing too.
Yeah. And, like I'm just watching your face as you're talking about this, and you're transported.
Yeah,
when
that's
you're talking
what,
about this.
Yeah.
And it's something that, and going back to the Alex Soth print too, that like when you get to know, I think so many of us, when we think about art, it will just be something that we see once. And like maybe if you go to a museum, you might see it once. Or if you see it, even if you're seeing it online, like you'll see a feature of it, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Whereas like the kinds of, some people I guess do have very good visual memories, but the kinds of way that that Alex Soth print that you have is the kind of thing that you can only really get when you've lived with it for a long time and you know every little detail because you've seen it so many times.
But but I'm a visual person, so they imprint on me. They do, even things I don't own.
Yeah,
that's how I make a joke about it too. I'm dyslexic. I read pictures, so I don't forget them. Don't ask me to remember a phone number, an address, or anything like that. My, personal, like, what's your social security number? Oh my God, pressure's on. I think I know it.
Yeah.
But,
well, yeah, we've been going a while, so we should probably wrap it up. But the last thing that I like to ask everyone is, and actually we've sort of touched on this already, but if there's a piece of art or literature or just general creativity that you've experienced recently that meant something to you.
Oh, recently. Well, actually, we got some. That's been like totally earth-shatteringly life-changing. I mean, I'm still stuck on Paul's border wall. I'm not over it. I can't wait to see it at Ginger's. I mean, that's actually more something I'm anticipating seeing. I've seen it before. This one will be different, though. This one, and I've been kind of imagining he was supposed to do it in San Diego, and he was supposed to use the Art Institute, and he was supposed to fill the whole room, the whole space with sand and dirt, and he was supposed to use a back wall. Well, now in Tucson, he's going to be able to install it in the middle of the room, corner to corner. So 60 feet by 10, so 60 feet long, something like that, by 10 feet tall about, and then you're going to be able to go on both sides of this border wall. And that's happening in October. And I'm going to go to see it and be there for the opening. So it's more something I'm anticipating. I can't wait to see that and feel it and see what it's like in that space with people and share it with them. And see how he deals with that, because now he has to deal with that.
Yeah.
That other side.
Yeah. That's something that I think also is a thing that people sometimes don't necessarily think about, is like when... That's something that Paul talked about when I was talking with him, is how he's really interested in activating a space.
Yeah.
But that, especially with visual arts, like the experience of being in a room with many other people with this art might be something different than just like seeing it
on its own.
I think that's pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Especially something as, powerful as this, as grave as this, as relevant as this, as palpable.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that's really nice that I just in general appreciate about his work, about Paul's work, is it is really apolitical. I think we bring the politic to this issue. But when you see it and his viewpoint of it and the way he presents it is just... This is a thing that people are experiencing. Yeah. This is the psychology of a place where this is happening, and I'm bringing it to you.
Yeah.
But, he's also, he's a photographer, and yet he isn't. So he's an interesting one, and that's what this one's also really exciting to be able to,
Yeah.
So dimensional, so big, so much to deal with. Photography is usually just on the wall, and we stand on one side and it's on the other, and this is going to be, more. Yeah. But
yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for talking with me. If people want to find out more about what you do, where can they go?
They can still use the jdcfineart.com.
Okay.
So I'll be there.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so do go and check out the JDC Fine Art website. There's a link in the show notes for that. And, get out there and see some art. Maybe you'll see something you love. Maybe you'll even start your own collection. So that is our show. Real quick, I wanted to mention that I'm starting up a newsletter for the show. Every other week, I'll be sending out an update with info about the week's guest, as well as some other stuff to look at and read that you might find interesting, stuff from around the web. If that sounds up your alley, you can sign up at keepthechannelopen.com/connect. And I'll put a link in the show notes for that as well. You can also follow me and the show on Twitter at ChannelOpenPod. on Facebook at facebook.com/keepthechannelopen, or you can send me an email at podcast@keepthechanneleopen.com. If you'd like to support the show, please consider making a monthly pledge in any amount at patreon.com/sakeriver. That's patreon.com/sakeriver, sake like the drink, and river like river. And, I'm always also thrilled for folks to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or even just shout out the show to your friends. Our theme music is by Poddington Bear. You can find more of his music available for licensing at soundofpicture.com. Next time our guest will be artist Rizal May Javier, so be sure to come back for that. And until then, remember, keep the channel open.